because there were 7 volunteers who are out there showcasing their abilities. I think overall, Brent, top to bottom, is a pretty good showing. Some stood out greater than others, but your thoughts on Tennessee's performance at the NFL Combine?
Well, I think it shows a lot about Tennessee's development of players, and I think that's a recruiting win for Josh Heupel. That's a huge recruiting win for him. When you talk about where Byron Young is, and I know Josh Heupel didn't sign Byron Young, that was the previous staff, but the development that Byron Young has gotten, and physically where he is, the numbers he put up, obviously Darnell Wright, to see where he has gotten to, and Jalen Hyatt as well. I mean, you talk about, Darnell and Jalen Hyatt probably weren't on anybody's, they certainly weren't high up on anybody's draft board a year ago. And certainly not 2 years ago, Darnell was not a guy that a lot of people were talking about. And to see where those guys are right now and how far they have come says a lot about Josh Heupel. And I think that's a recruiting win. They should use that in recruiting heavily. And I think some guys, went out and obviously did well. Byron Young made himself some money on Thursday night. There's no question about that. I think Darnell Wright continues to impress. 40 time was plenty good enough. The physical stuff he did in pass pro, I think, was good. The praise he got from everybody else was good. I think Darnell Wright has been the big winner for Tennessee since the end of the regular season. Obviously, he played in the bowl game, but then to see what he did in the Senior Bowl and then what he's done, at the Combine, to me, he's the biggest winner of all those guys right now.
I would agree with that. I think he's the biggest winner since the end of the season. Byron Young might have been the biggest mover, if you will, from the NFL Combine, because, man, a 4.43 official 40-yard dash, that is second fastest to Nolan Smith in terms of edge rushers of the Combine. That is moving. He made him some money in a big-time way, to where he's kind of undersized in terms of height and stature and weight and all that, but making up with good on-the-field work and, of course, that 40-yard dash. And he had a good week at the Senior Bowl as well a month ago. So he looked good in that regard. But let's talk about Jalen Hyatt. Of course, he did not play in the Orange Bowl, didn't play in the Senior Bowl because he's not a senior, but went down to the NFL Combine, and he had a good showing. He ran a decent 40 at 4.41. He had a good broad, had good vertical, ran nice routes and everything. It's not like he had a bad showing, but Brent, I think you and I both know he'd be the first to say, hey, I can run a whole lot faster, and that 4.41 was not fast enough, what I showed on Saturday.
Well, and here's the bizarre thing, and I'm not a conspiracy theory guy, okay, so I don't want to go down this road, but those numbers guys were putting up on Thursday night compared to the numbers we have seen the rest of the weekend in the Combine are head scratchers. Look, I'm elated for Byron Young. I think Byron Young's a great story. I really do. I mean, he goes to some school, in a strip mall, they basically shut it down, and then he goes and he's working at the Dollar General or whichever one it was, and he works at a gas station. He ends up, taking the flyer and everything. I mean, it's a great story. But you can't tell me you're going to line up Byron Young and Jalen Hyatt beside each other, and those guys are going to run essentially an even race. I don't think Nolan Smith's going to run an even race with Jalen Hyatt. I don't recall Kirby Smart matching him up one-on-one with elite speed receivers. So again, something seemed to be a little off with the numbers for the receivers based on the numbers we saw that first night for those, edge rushers and linebackers, which was a bit of a head scratcher. I don't think anybody's going to look at Jalen Hyatt and say, man, he's too slow. I think if there's anybody questioning anything about Jalen Hyatt, it's going to be he's not heavy enough. Can he play physical enough? I think that's the bigger question, and what people will dive into the tape and look to see is, can he play physical enough, at the next level? But the 40 numbers didn't seem to match up for 4 days for me in Indianapolis, particularly for a track that's been long known as the fastest track out there, because it wasn't just that Jalen Hyatt was at a number we didn't expect. There were only a handful of, 3 guys ahead of him, 4 guys ahead of him at the receiver position. The receivers didn't go low like you thought they would go, is my point.
Another 40 time I do want to point out, whether it was a little off or whatever, earlier today you had Darnell Wright and talking about maybe the biggest winner since the end of the season. He runs a 5.01 official 40-yard dash time. For a guy that is 6'5", 330 pounds, that's scooting. In fact, this is from Next Gen Stats. Only 2 other players since the year 2003 have run a faster 40-yard dash time at the NFL Combine that weigh over 330 pounds. I mean, in the last 20 years of those 330-pound tackles, Darnell Wright is the fastest guy to run the 40. And again, who cares? It's a 40-yard dash and you're playing offensive line. Like, again, when's that going to matter? But I think it just goes to show you, again, his athleticism, his makeup. And I'm going to play a clip in a moment, but, I mean, just the way he just kind of gets in there and talks football, there's a reason why he might be the first fall taken, and there's a reason why he has been kind of the biggest winner here since the end of the season. He's just a freak, and he's an experienced freak, a guy that's played over 40 games in the SEC.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, he's played a ridiculous amount of snaps the last 2 years. I mean, basically over 1,700 snaps the last 2 seasons. Here's the thing about the 40 time. These guys train for the 40, right? So they go out and they spend 6 months. Go watch the tape of the interception that Alabama had by Kool-Aid McKinstry on the batted ball. That was pass interference was called and gave Tennessee second life on that 4th down play and Tennessee's win. And see who the offensive lineman is that forces McKinstry basically to step out of bounds and say, I don't want to get hit by him. That's Darnell Wright. And he came from a long way. I mean, he came hauling is what he did. That when you turn on the tape, that will show you that the guy runs a 5 flat 40, okay, or whatever. I mean, he's in full pads running that way. So there's tangible evidence of it in addition to him doing this on the track right here where he runs. He is a ridiculously freakish athlete. And it was all about whether or not he could get himself in shape, put himself in shape, and whether he could completely buy in and go. And he did under Glenn Ellerbe, and he is going to be rewarded handsomely for that. He is a guy that I know there was some talk about, back in the preseason, he might come back for another year, some NIL money, whatever. He has made absolutely the right decision for himself.
Yep.
I mean, he has absolutely done what he – now, selfishly, would Tennessee love to have him back? And as a fan, would you like to have him back? Would he make Tennessee's offensive line better? Oh, absolutely. But for the betterment of Darnell Wright, he has absolutely made the best decision for himself, and he is going to be rewarded handsomely for it because, look, I mean, of all the guys projected at the tackle position that were projected ahead of him, a couple of those guys projected ahead of him in a lot of mock drafts, he scored physically better than all of them. No. And then he gets the praise he gets from everybody. And the more people watch the tape of him, it's, oh, he's durable. And, oh, by the way, he can block people. He's pretty good in pass pro. Not bad. He's shut down some pass rushers this year. Good player.
Speaking of that, this was earlier in the week. I think this was maybe Friday morning, maybe Thursday, whenever the offensive line was answering questions, excuse me, to the media. And this is a guy in Darnell Wright that didn't do media this year. I think he did one with the Tennessee Prime with us, and that was awesome to see. But he didn't do much media this year. And so that interaction, like how would he be, that was a big question because it's a big part of the draft process. The question was asked to Darnell Wright, what went into blocking guys like B.J. Ojulari, guys like Will Anderson Jr., and the success that you found against those guys. Listen to this about 70 seconds. It's a little lengthy, about 70 seconds. Just this football guy talking football. And this is why I feel like NFL scouts, personnel, GM, coaches are going to love this guy. Give this a listen. Darnell Wright talking about blocking those guys.
So say when you're studying for a guy like Will Anderson, you know that he's going to be mostly speed. So I break guys down into like, you have category of speed, you have power, you have finesse. Rarely do you have somebody that's gonna hit every single one of those categories. So you give them maybe 2 out of 3. So a guy like Will Anderson, you'll give him speed and power, but a guy like B.J. Ojulari, you'll give him speed and finesse. So going into like against B.J., I would like during practice, you would think that it wasn't a good thing to do, but like I would overset. Like we don't have a B.J. Ojulari on scout team, obviously, but I would overset every rep on scout team just because I know that B.J. Ojulari, he makes all of his money on the edge. You know what I mean? Like that's mostly where he's good at. But his inside counter move isn't as effective. So going into it, like say if you're setting, like you want to stay inside out usually, but for this game specifically in practice leading up to it, I would set inside eye to the outside eye. So you would call it an overset. You would think I'm out of position, but it's kind of I'm just baiting them into it. So But then you have a guy like Will Anderson, and you do. It's just a whole process.
It's pretty impressive stuff there, Brent. A guy just kind of breaking it down. And that was for everybody to kind of understand. I mean, you didn't have to be a football junkie to kind of understand what he was talking about, what goes into blocking some of those guys. And those type of conversations, along with the game tape, along with what he's doing at the combine in his pro day, is going to be why he's the big winner. He'll continue to win, and I think he'll be a first-round draft pick. I do.
Yeah, I mean, he's got all the tools to be a first-round draft pick. Now, it'll be about need. It'll be about fall the right plays. I had an NFL guy tell me, I kept telling this guy, the NFL guy, that I thought he was a first-round talent. I really did. I thought he would be a guy who would shoot up. I agreed with Austin. Austin said this before I did, so I don't want to steal his thunder because it's his point. But I echo it. I thought he would shoot up the draft boards a lot. I really did. And this NFL person said, well, you know, the thing working against him is his reputation. I said, he didn't have a reputation. What do you mean? Well, the perception some people have of him is he's, you know, just maybe not a great locker room guy, maybe not the great this, because nobody knows him. And I said, well, when you get to know him, you'll see that's the opposite. My only concern with him in talking to people is is he mature enough? Now that answer right there just showed you where he's at. But he can get a little silly with people, with his buddies. He can kind of be goofy and silly. But I think one of the things that was a concern that he's had to answer more than the physical skills is what kind of guy is he? Like, where is he from a football IQ? Where is he from a locker room standpoint? Is he a guy you're going to invest a lot of money in and say, hey, I want him to anchor one side of my offensive line for a long time? My response to that is, if you talk to him long enough, yes, he is. Because he's passionate about the game of football. He's gaining confidence. Glenn Ellerby's been a home run for him. And I think that you're seeing the results of his work and what he's about. And I think answers like that in the media sessions, I mean, you listen to that answer and you go, why didn't he do any media? Why didn't he want to do media? You know? But he's clearly polished enough. He can clearly handle it. And he's going to make somebody a really good pro. And I think the durability, the athletic ability, and the knowledge of the game are going to be something that everybody's going to look at. There's no way he's not higher on everybody's draft board right now than he was leaving the Orange Bowl, in my opinion. There's no way he's not moved up everybody's draft board. Now, is he a first-rounder on everybody's board? I don't know. But there's no way. There's no medical red flag for him from an injury standpoint. There's nothing to physically red flag him. And the more you watch him work and skill stuff, the more impressed you are with what he does. And the more you hear him talk, the more impressed you are. I think he's the big winner.
Two of the guys I want to mention real quick before we get Grant Ramey on to talk Tennessee basketball here in about 2 minutes. Jeremy Banks ran a 4.5 after stumbling in his first 40-yard attempt that clocked at like a 4.7, but looked like in his group with the fellow linebackers, he was either second or third in pretty much everything. So it looked like he had a decent weekend. But Cedric Tillman, I think, had a really good weekend. He ran a low, I think it was a 4.52, 4.53, which for him is a really, really good time. And I think that's going to help him a little bit in terms of, he's a bigger, more physical body receiver. We know that. He looked healthy. Looked like Cedric Tillman might have made a little bit of noise this weekend as well. At least he didn't hurt himself.
Well, he's a guy who can big boy some DBs, right? Jalen Hyatt's going to be more speed, right? The speed factor is a bigger question mark for because that's his game, is the speed game. For Cedric Tillman, he has the ability to body you up on a hard slant. He's got a good catch radius. He can high point the ball well. He's made a lot of contested catches in his career at Tennessee the last 2 years. So I think all those things work in his favor. I'll be curious to see if he feels like he needs to run again, when he has his pro day in Knoxville. Does Jalen Hyatt feel like he needs to run again after his combine deal? If I'm Darnell Wright, the only thing I'm doing is skill work with the offensive line. You're not going to see me run anything else. I'm not taking a chance on my hamstring for any pre-draft workouts by showing you another 40 time. So I'll be curious to see what some of those guys elect to do from a physical testing standpoint versus do they just come out and do skill stuff, on their pro day in Knoxville. I think when you talk about Tillman, you talk about Hyatt, you talk about Darnell Wright, Byron Young, there are going to be a handful of NFL teams that want to bring them to their facility to work them out. They're going to get a lot of individual workouts. And You know, Jeremy Banks is probably a guy who needs to show well at pro day to have a chance to get into that world. But those other guys, I think, are definitely going to get a lot of individual team workouts.
7 volunteers took part in the NFL Combine over the weekend. We got full coverage. Matt Ray did a nice little running story all weekend long over at Volquest.com. You want to see the 40-yard dash time, see what people are saying about them, seeing the measurements, all that and more. Volquest.com for Tennessee Vols at the NFL Combine. Hey, thanks so much for watching the video here at Volquest on YouTube, the leading source of University of Tennessee football, basketball, and recruiting. Be sure to check out our latest video right here and our latest live show right above it. All that at Volquest.com and Volquest on YouTube.